Alrighty, y'all. We are basically at the end of Season 11 PTR. This is technically Monday night. It technically ends on Tuesday. And I feel like I've got my money's worth out of the PTR. I know what I have tested. I know what I've looked into. I've experienced the game. And I basically wanted to throw a couple things right up at the front of the video before we start diving into my individual feedback points. One, just to give you some context, over the first day and a half, I just took a character from level 1 and organically leveled them all the way up to Torment 3. I did every capstone up to that point. I didn't use any weird bugs for, like super leveling my character. And I didn't go out of my way to like mega grind out anything. I wasn't sanctifying gear, etc. I was just playing a character through the normal progression. So I have that experience, and then after halfway through day 2, I boosted characters, and then I just started playing every single Necromancer build that exists. I went out and I did the different content types, and mostly then focused on pit and tower to see how things felt. So I have the early game progression experience, and I have the late game pushing experience as well to kind of fully encapsulate it. And then for my next point, I just want to talk about my biases. If you've ever checked out my YouTube comments or whenever I post on Reddit or something like that, people like to point out that one, I'm a Diablo shill, I'm a Blizzard shill. And yeah, I get it, right? I'm generally pretty upbeat about the game. I'm generally pretty positive. I try to understand the developer mindset underneath the changes instead of just baby raging. If that makes my opinion less valuable, then F me. I don't know what to tell you. But I do have like a pretty awesome group of just like hate watchers, apparently, who just like come out just to tell me and just scream in all caps about how, effing stupid I am. So if you're a hate watcher here today, go ahead and shout out down in the comments, literally in all caps. I appreciate y'all engaging on the posts. I really do. In some of those things, like inside of the screaming, there are pain points and there are frustrations. And regardless of how like vitriolic and absolutely nasty it all is, I am able to distill out a little bit of what that mindset and what that player group, if we want to call it one, is trying to get to the crux of. So there's a little bit of value in it. The other side of it, though, is like, it's weird to like dehumanize people just because they play a game a lot and have strong opinions about the game, as if that would devalue their insights, right? I always find that a little bit interesting. But I am generally positive about the game. I want the game to succeed, and I want the developers to stay motivated to continue to make the game that I like. Oddly enough, yes, I'm invested in a video game that I like, that I've been playing since I was, 8 years old, when I first got my hands on a burned copy of Diablo 1. Sorry, Blizzard. Back in the day, you could very easily burn copies and just play single player. I didn't do it. I think it was my dad's friend. But those are my biases. From that standpoint, if you just wanted like a quick, where's my temperature check, so that you know whether or not you're going to find interesting stuff in this video, I'm a little bit 50-50 on most of the changes. I think that a lot of these things are needed for the game to be healthy, and I think rolling it all out at the same time and the severity of them was a bold choice. But luckily, it's a PTR. You could take bold swings here, take the feedback, and then make it good. That's the whole idea. I think a lot of people are kind of, I mean, without being like too mean, throwing a bit of a hissy fit and seemingly have short-term memory loss, because every PTR, they roll out things and then vastly change them walking out of the PTR. And I don't expect it to be any different here. So that's like the quick temp check. So if you're still interested to hear my opinions, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. The major topics that I wanted to touch on, because I think that these ones are at the crux of the majority of both what actually changed in the game, and also what people are having strong feelings about. So that would be combat in the game in general, crafting in air quotes there, seasonal content in air quotes here as well, the leveling experience, and this kind of feeds into progression in general, the toughness system. I did put out a video fully explaining how toughness works. If you want to get a better understanding of that, I'll just go ahead and link it. It is good. It's ultimately good. It's just the worst version of education that they possibly could have done. But I touch on that here, oddly enough. And then the tower. I keep it pretty short and sweet about the tower, because I think the tower itself could be its whole own video. But it's definitely here in the game. It's super in beta. They've made it abundantly clear that this is a super beta. So I'm just trying to like nail the things I would like to see changed the fastest to make it more enjoyable. I'll have timestamps down to everything below. If you come across anything that you think, or you feel like I didn't go into it in enough detail, or if you had questions, comment down below as you go, just so you don't forget it later on. Because I really think that this is arguably the most important time period of a PTR in a preseason. It is right here where the devs are the most open to and putting the most effort towards hearing our feedback and receiving critique and acting on it. Every day lost is another day that it won't make it into whatever cycle leads to the live season when it goes. So this is the time to do it. So shout out down there. Let's go ahead and talk about combat. And I'm going to try to not bloviate on any one topic too much. You can obviously just read these bullet points. But one, people don't like to look at videos. Sometimes they're just kind of listening. So I guess it's a little bit of like a solo podcast. Diablo ultimately boils down to two different things. Pushing into difficult territory where combat becomes a slog, or blasting through content that you have trivialized. And both of these things are differently rewarding. But it's the slog at the end that I think is a bit of a problem. One, the combat changes. If you're unaware, they have supposedly changed like every single monster family, the addition of champions, which are now elite packs that have minions, all having affixes and 20 plus affixes being added to the game, etc., etc. We're hoping to dynamically impact the feeling of combat, and I really don't think that they have, at least not in the end game. In the leveling process, you definitely feel it, and I'll just give you a quick sneak peek. I think that the leveling process is like the best that it's ever been. I think that new players, old players, experienced players, and more casual players alike are going to have a more meaningful time progressing. This game, I feel, is best when you're fighting a pack of elites that has a number of affixes that you're actively moving around with, that you're dodging and you're crowd controlling them and you're moving into a better position, you're applying a bunch of damage, you're moving out of the way, maybe you're keeping something corralled, maybe you're dragging them along with you as you go. When the combat is dynamic, that's when it feels the best. And endgame content just doesn't allow for this at all. You are either just smashing open world content where it doesn't matter what the monsters were, or you're in the pit in the tower. And combat scenarios in the pit and in the tower typically take like 2 minutes or more to complete. And that doesn't sound like a long time, but I'm not talking about the boss. I'm talking about a pack of enemies. And now in the pit and the tower, with so many overlapping AoE effects, so many visual effects, so many colors on the screen, so many highlighted names, combat feels the worst it's ever felt. I have an example here where I was in a tower run and I fought an enemy pack for 1 minute and 21 seconds. This is 81 full seconds of combat, baby. And for 22 seconds of that, I was hard crowd controlled. Now, this is a Necromancer specific issue because most other classes in the game can just have 100% uptime on Unstoppable. Sadly, the Necromancer cannot. And oddly enough, being crowd controlled for 25% of a combat scenario where I was only fighting 2 elite packs. I hadn't pulled an entire screen's worth of enemies. I wasn't fighting 5+ elite packs. These were 2. And one of them was just a Naga Shaman, and one of them was a Cold Spider. And I was crowd controlled for 25% of the time. Not only that, because it takes so long to kill the enemies, there's really no ability to have like AoE effects for one particular combat scenario and then single target damage effects for a different scenario. It's just all of your skills have to be able to hit all of the monsters and also be competent against a single enemy, because all content types that matter have density and then end in a boss. So you can't differentiate your skills, you can't differentiate your build. And with the inability to be able to scale multiple skills damage simultaneously, you just have a skill. And if that skill isn't good at doing everything, your build is bad. And it makes it not really viable in all the different circumstances that combat in the pit and the tower require. Add on top of that, I really didn't feel the differences, like the dynamic monster behavior changes. Was I getting attacked more often? Maybe. It was kind of hard to tell because every monster has like 4 different flying scimitar, red Tron saw blade effect. Are the monsters hitting me? Are the AoEs hitting me? I honestly can't tell you. And God forbid you have damage numbers on if you're trying to like benchmark how much DPS you have. You legit can't see anything in the game. But it really feels like every vampire pack still had a big melee dude who knocked me back, and then a flying dude who dealt way too much damage, but I also couldn't crowd control and couldn't get near. They would just run away from me fast so that I can get them. And then some kind of like AoE damage effect from a little dude hiding in a corner. Every pack still very much feels the same to me, so I don't know what was changed because I didn't experience it. I also feel like there's this kind of myth that there is some kind of attrition-based combat, and this just doesn't exist in the end game. In the early game, having life on hit, life per second, even life on kill can make things like speed farming and early game progression, or like grinding out a boss in a capstone dungeon, feel significant. But in the end game, these stats just don't do anything. They completely changed over with Fortify to be like a healing per second mechanism, but I don't heal in combat scenarios. I either am dead or I am alive. I'm either unkillable in just kind of bashing damage into enemies, or I've been one shot by a non-ground effect, or I've been one shot by a non-death effect, or 5 lightning spikes have all shot through me simultaneously and dealt my entire health pool of life. I don't know what the developers have played where this healing felt impactful. Maybe they're just Giga Chads. Maybe they're just better than like all of us who play the game at a high level. But I just don't see it. And it really makes these stats feel bad, and they have negative ramifications in the loot grind later on, right? They are there. They're theoretically supposed to be able to do something, but in the end game, they don't matter. So they just ruin loot. And I really wish that this was different in a meaningful way. Like, I wish that we got enough health and monsters dealt damage in a consistent enough manner where a survivability mechanism, like an actual strategy, was out healing the damage that you were taking. That would be a meaningful addition to the game, and right now it just doesn't really exist. When I was first putting together this feedback, I was kind of just bitching and whining for a hot second, I'm not going to lie to you. So this first section has a how to fix section. The rest of them are just kind of incorporated into the feedback that I have. But how do you fix this? I think that if combat in the game was meaningfully different, so where you were just engaging 1 to 2 enemy packs at any given time, they died faster, but they dealt more damage, and it was more consistent, where like learning what the monsters would do would make it so that I could dodge them actively in something more akin to a Dark Souls, then yes, we could actually have fun combat where we're not just constantly CCing each other for infinite amounts of time and needing to fight for 2+ minutes. Similarly, if combat was just sped up, but was like the equal amount of deadly and meaningful as it would be in a longer fight, content could just go faster. I think that the pit being 15 minutes is just a slog. I think that the tower being 10 minutes is also a slog. And if it was just like faster, everybody would just be happier. Now, I know there's so many people out there like, no, they're buffing out their time played, blah, blah, blah. I get that. I also like conspiracy theories. I also like it has to be, this is the most malicious form possible. But oddly enough, I have talked to these developers, and that's like really just like not it. They are trying to find these balances where things feel good. And right now, I just don't think that this balance feels good. Let's go ahead and talk about crafting in air quotes here, because right now in Diablo 4, I don't think that we have crafting, but crafting means a lot of different things. So take Path of Exile, for example, right? At one point, Jonathan said that putting the runes that give you like single resistances into sockets in your gear was part of crafting. I don't think anybody really sees that as crafting, right? I think people see that as itemization, and I think that crafting is kind of expanded in a weird way. So what do I think the definition of crafting in an ARPG is? I think crafting is putting a bunch of things in a box according to a schematic, clicking a button, then getting a kind of deterministic yet RNG-based outcome. Crafting in Diablo 2 was peak crafting, IMO. Shoutouts down in the comments if you think that D2 was like the peak of crafting. I promise you, I'm not just like a D2, like super try hard, like this is the peak of gaming. It really wasn't. It was just great at the time, but at least crafting they got right. The reason why I think that crafting was so good there is because crafting helped to fill in niche, like hyper-specific itemization options for builds, as well as giving avenues for players to get more attempts at finding gear that would be good for them by taking things that they found in the game that were of low value and hoarding them to be able to use. So when we were playing the game and picking up a flawless gem here or there, or a jewel here or there, or a potentially good magic base, or going in shopping using like the known Q level and item level of like what would be in Charcy's screen would allow us to make decisions. There was depth to it for the people who liked it, and there was very shallow, very easy to understand power potential for other people. And what it basically meant is that it added a ton of value to everything that we did in the game, because even if you didn't find a GG piece of gear or like an awesome rare item, you at least found a couple bits that you might be able to use for crafting later. And I feel like that's been missing from Diablo 4 for a very long time. The changes in Season 11 PTR sought to change how we modify gear to reduce the impact of RNG and to make minimum functionality easier to reach. I think that's ultimately a good thing, while taking a lot of the texture and a lot of the enjoyment out of it entirely. And I don't think that has been properly replaced. I don't think that has been properly brought back in a different way. If these changes came along with a crafting system, I think it would make a lot more sense. But I do think that ultimately the changes to tempering are good. My major issue is that with the reduction down to 1 temper stat as opposed to 2 temper stats, we have 2 negative outcomes. One, I have to read more items. I have to read more stuff on items. And while I'm good with that because I used to read 6 affix rare pieces of gear, and I've also been playing a ton of PoE 2 where everything has between 1 to 6 affixes regardless, in Diablo 4, we learned that the player base didn't like having to compare 4 stats versus 4 different stats, and the chop down to 3 stats was to answer a pain point. Maybe that pain point is gone, but I don't think that people feel like that pain point is gone. The other thing, which I actually think is like legitimately impactful, because people will learn to read more stuff, right? Like reading items is a skill. It is a skill that you develop in ARPGs that help you to gain the meta progression of efficiency while playing. I know it's kind of hard to grok. I know it's not like I know it's not immediately valuable, but I do think that's a really important skill, and people who are better at it will have a better time. It's also inherently a little bit ableist, but like there's nothing I can do about that, right? But there's at least one part of this. I do think, though, in the loss of the second temper slot, we are going to learn the hard way how much of our enjoyment of the game and quality of life was being carried on that second temper slot. The utility affixes that you could temper on basically made skills actually feel good. Duration of ultimate skills, size of AoE effects, duration of like on-ground effects, the ability to add on specific resistances or passives that granted utility, like greater chance to stun or more armor. These things aren't going to be able to fit on your gear because so much player power has been removed from gear, which was important. Gear was way too strong. I know people don't like that, but it is true. I have a whole video about like how insanely impactful your gear is for the overall power of your character in comparison to everything else. So power did have to come down. But because power has come down, you are now more incentivized to either put defensive or offensive tempers onto your gear. And what that means is that you don't have space for utility tempers, and those stats are just going to go away. They're not available in any other form. I would really love to see those utility tempers make their way into the item affix pool over things like individual resistances or all of these overlapping life healing mechanisms. I don't want to bloat the affixes in the game, but there are some that like just need to be there, and they could be created more generically, so they just kind of work, right? Like skill duration could be an affix that rolls on utility slots. AoE size could be a stat that rolls on utility slots. And now you can take your 4th stat on your piece of gear and fit that on. When you are using a legendary piece of gear to fit on more survivability, you can also add on these utility stats. And as always, you can choose to have these utility stats on like a speed farming focused amulet slot. Now, all of a sudden, like that thing has a legitimate swap between your pushing and your speed farming. And I really hate how much quality of life is going to go by the wayside in sacrifice to scaling damage and survivability harder. Oh, and for tempering, we just need to be able to change the category of the temper. The idea is that you can temper on whatever stat you need, but the moment that I temper on an offensive temper, I can no longer do a resource temper. So if either my build has changed, or I want to play a different build, or I realize that like one stat was wrong, or it turns out I just got a new gear piece, but it only works if I change this stat, It never made sense that you couldn't change the category of your temper, and now more than ever, when I can only have one on the piece of gear, it just needs to be able to be changed. I assume it's a technical limitation, but I think it's like untenable. I think it is like that strong. They need to make it so that we can change the category, because what they've basically done is shunted the bricking of an item over to if you ever have the audacity of wanting to try something different with your build. The changes in Masterworking are ultimately very good for the health of the game. Our player power had to come down, and the overabundance of the slot machine, where you could sit in town for 20 minutes clicking a button and either get nothing or walk away with a weaker piece of gear, even though you spent all this time grinding, never felt good. But I do think that this is like too extreme, and it's made items feel significantly less cool. So because Masterworking used to increase all of your affixes, gear felt better even when you didn't get the best outcome from the Masterwork crit. Now that it only increases the base stat, the stats on your gear feel very lame. They feel very static. I think that we can find a happy middle ground here, where as you Masterwork, as you increase quality on the item, the stat range can increase, meaning that where your item rolled in that stat range also increases. So let's take an example, right? You can roll 420 to 451 maximum life. I think those are the numbers. If I'm wrong, you can go ahead and correct me. Let's say you rolled a 421. This item is nearly the worst possible outcome for maximum life. There's nothing I can do about that. And there really isn't a difference between 421 and 451, but people generally like perfect outcomes as opposed to imperfect outcomes. Basic human psychology, right? If increasing the quality of the gear could increase the top end and the minimum end of the affix range by the same 20% and bump your stat up along with it, you really haven't drastically increased the power of a character. Not meaningfully, right? But it makes every part of the item feel better, and you are masterworking the item. The idea that the item gets better when you masterwork it is fairly simple. And I think that if we could just add this little half step where, sure, you're not all of a sudden getting 50 plus bonus on every single stat, but the core stat that you had on it, and maybe the crit chance you had on, and the attack speed are all now a bit stronger. Maybe this brought you over a hurdle for a breakpoint. Maybe this just like very incremental increase at least can be felt by the character. I mean, just cut the number of clicks down to 5. We had 5 blacksmithing upgrades in the past. In this, 1 to 20, but it can roll 1 to 4, so technically it could take 5 or it could take 10, who knows? I don't know why there's RNG in how long it takes me to quality an item. So either just make it one number. This weird RNG factor isn't making me feel like I'm winning a prize. I can't really moment to moment rationalize whether or not I was more or less efficient, and just cut it down to 5. Literally clicking the button 20 times just feels bad. I don't know why we're giving all of us old millennials arthritis for no reason. Sanctifying, again, I had a whole video on sanctifying. It's basically you either like the idea of slamming gear or you don't. I think that, and please, let me just project this onto you. I think that a lot of people who have never played a game with slamming, who are saying slamming is the end of the world, just need to experience it. Like, organically, it's the best thing in ARPGs. It's just very fun. It's very good. If you're super risk averse, I get it. So don't do it. And I know that's an easy cop out, like, oh, you don't like it here, just get out. But a game cannot have gambling without it being gambling. And gambling is only fun if there is a chance to lose. And no, getting durability is not you losing. Losing has to be meaningful. And we can argue back and forth of whether or not the system has to be gambling, but the system is seeking to be gambling. And if it's seeking to be gambling, it needs to have loss as a potential outcome. It's important for catharsis. It's important for there to be high moments and low moments. It's important for you to have something to strive for. You can disagree with that. I get it. Ultimately, though, I think that there's one really important change to sanctifying, and it's that you have to be able to change your aspect. I'm kind of fine with tempers getting locked. I'm generally fine with not being able to remasterwork it after that point, because it's sold as a end of the road thing that you do to your gear. But being able to change the aspect slot, the best outcome from sanctifying is that you're going to get an aspect That aspect is going to add functionality to your build that it didn't have previously. This added functionality can either make it better for a different build or differently better for your current build, which would allow you to swap out something for something else. But if you get to the point where everything's sanctified, you can't swap anything. And the aspect itself being able to be swapped out, I've come over to this side. I agree. That makes the most sense because you get to react to the sanctify that you got, and there's just no downside to that. It's just strictly better, and then people at the very least don't feel like they've lost out when they get one of the best outcomes possible. Like, there should never be a feels bad moment about hitting the jackpot. I know I'm one of the only people who cares about jewelry and blacksmith caches, but it's because they're in the game, and ostensibly they're there for us to have more chances to be able to force item drops and potentially get upgrades. With materials being hyper simplified, I realized that they had like hyper simplified everything. So in the end game, you're actually only using Forgotten Souls, and you can trade up all your resources into Forgotten Souls for all of the different crafting options available. With them being simplified, I do think that the caches need to be reinvestigated. These things live in this weird duality where the people who would need them the most are not the people who are rich enough to afford them, and the people who are rich enough to afford them don't need them, so they serve no purpose, and they should instead serve a purpose. Seasonal content is probably where I'm either going to find the most people who agree with me or find the people who hate my guts. So lock in here, boys. I'm just going to very quickly talk about the different bosses in a different content, and I'm basically just going to read it off. Azmodan as a world boss and one that you can spawn to get different amounts of rewards. 10 out of 10, no notes. Andariel in the Undercity feels way too random, so like she either is or is not there, but I'm running the Undercity to consistently take pop shots at getting a particular target farmed outcome. So if Andariel isn't there, it kind of undermines the entire point of Undercity. Duriel and Helltides is fun, but I feel like we've lost a lesson learned here, where they seemingly have phases that you can't skip. Like, it seems like he will dig underground twice no matter what. And I don't know why we like removed phases from the actual bosses, but for some reason they're here. I know the Blood Maiden also had this mechanic where she would like throw out fireballs and then fly away, but you can kill her before that happens. And as far as I can tell with Duriel, if he had hit a life threshold, he just immediately dug down. I don't know, maybe I wasn't killing him fast enough. And Belial in the pit sucks. Like, hard stop, just bad. Him constantly knocking you back and also knocking the monsters back just sucks the moon out of the sky. The eyes are difficult to click on controller because you will always have a skill tied to A to activate. If there's a monster within anywhere, you'll do an attack skill as opposed to click the eye. And then there's like this weird lag before they come out, and they are like premeditating their attack. So very often you'll click this eye and then you're just being slammed by a huge like Naga Berserk warrior, and it's like, oh cool, I wish I never clicked this in the first place. Add on to that, Belial as a boss is really bad. He has this huge wind-up time where he's technically there and invisible, so you can actually hit him a little bit, but then he stops being targetable, and all of this is just wasting time. Then after, when you kill him, his death animation takes so long you can actually fail a pit run. I've also been attacked by the shadow attacks, like Belial's shadow, like acid spray, and the bubble just didn't spawn yet because Belial's death animation took too long. Add on to that, he's a boss that doesn't spawn ads, so he's basically the worst pit boss ever. And he has multiple phases where he's untargetable. He's like the den mother on crack. All in all, horrid addition to it. Like, I just wish he wasn't there. The pit is about grinding out like very specific circumstances to get the highest pit push, or speed farming. And in both ways, he just slows down the process. Sanctify being added as a seasonal crafting mechanic feels very Path of Exile. Because this one is like directly engaging with our gear as opposed to the other ones. So if you notice, like during the Witch one, we could craft, these seasonal gems, etc. Sanctifying is like working directly on our gear, so it feels so much more like PoE to me. But PoE also comes with content that the thing's tied to, and I don't think that just adding these bosses to the different content types that we're already doing really counts as adding content. Like, I don't think that there should ever be a season where there isn't literally a new content type to go run. So I really feel like we're just kind of dropping the ball here. It feels like, to me, we're kind of putting two things together that almost kind of don't have anything to do with one another. And this is what we got coming out of it. So it feels like maybe some things were cut and left on the, like the editing room floor. I'm not too sure. I also don't like these participation trophy, like we have seasonal powers at home seasonal powers. I almost wish they just kind of didn't exist. So if you haven't looked at it at all, basically you're going to go kill the 4 mini bosses. You get a purified version and a corrupted version. The corrupted version adds more reward to content. It's very like Atlas passive tree where it's like, oh, I'm opting into more difficulty to get more reward. That's actually sick. It really feels like a soft launch of this concept in its entirety, because it's the thing that we have been asking for the entire length of Diablo 4 coming out. So I really like that. But the corrupted effects suck, and then the purified effects get you the reward and a benefit for no downside. So you're just never going to put in the corrupted versions once you have the purified versions, unless you are like a Giga Chad that likes pain, or you really, really, really need the benefits of the corrupted version too. The funny part about this is that I think in all of the content that isn't the pit, it kind of doesn't matter. You could just load all of them on, and you're really not going to feel it. And also, like, the ones for Helltide are actually just kind of a benefit no matter what, because there's more stuff to fight, so you get more outcomes from the Helltide that you were looking for. But the one in the pit is just like nothing. You don't want to add another bad thing to the pit. Belial being in there no matter what you do anyways is bad enough. And I know the developers got clowned on for having seasonal powers every season. I get it. It's like easy to make fun of, and if everybody keeps saying it, it must be true. But oddly enough, seasonal powers were some of the only interesting things about seasons. I liked figuring out what my build was going to do with new seasonal powers and how it changed stuff. And sometimes there was a seasonal power build, and sometimes it made leveling really easy, and sometimes it was like broken in the end game and had to get reined in. That was interesting. These benefits are like, you have more armor and you have more res and you fortify a bit. Again, they basically just like shouldn't have been there. Like, if we're not going to do powers, we shouldn't have done powers. And if these are the powers, they're not really powers. They don't change what I'm doing about my character in any meaningful way. So why are they there? Right? And I kind of understand the pickle that they were in. What were they going to do? Boss powers? We already did boss powers. I think this, with the introduction of Hadriel and the Sanctifying, we really could have had like heavenly benefits here. Like, Hadriel is like, oh man, you know, if I did like real angel stuff, the angels would find out and they would be angry. But if I just kind of like imbue some stuff with power, hey, what's going on, Rob? If we just imbue some stuff with power, they're not really going to notice. Imbue me with power then. Do that to me. Give me wings. Give me, I don't know, a lightning spear or something cool. Yeah, give me, I don't know, dude, give me a cool hat where I can hide my face. No, but sincerely, we could have gotten like heavenly powers. We could have gotten some node to the light as opposed to the bosses. I really just wish there was like actually boss powers. And I think that bowing down to this like very vocal minority of people who are like, it's bad that we get powers. No, it isn't. It's just not. It's interesting. And I'd rather have seen them do something more. Oh, and leave Chaos Rifts in the game. Chaos Rifts absolutely shouldn't go anywhere. They made running Nightmare Dungeons better. They made doing Helltide better. Hell, you could put them in more content. I would much rather see these return back to the game. This was like the best thing from the previous season as far as stuff that made playing it more fun for me. And I would rather see them stay for sure. Leveling. I think that leveling is both the best experience that's ever been. And I think most people who really tried to level and really tried to form a full opinion about it would agree with it. But I do think there are a couple things that are just like pain points that, again, we like learned lessons about and now have just decided those weren't right. So I'm going to jump ahead to that kind of, because at least for my first point, I think the capstone dungeons coming back to the game is amazing. These are like so good. These are such great teaching moments. They gave them really interesting mechanics. There's kind of an issue where some of them have like bonus, go kill 5 guys. And at least one of them, I reran every single map 3 times to double check, and there weren't 5 guys to kill. So I don't know if that was a bug or if I somehow missed it. But for the length of the capstone dungeons and how far spread out these objectives are, it just makes it feel like something is wrong rather than, oh, sure, I'll just run through this next gate and they'll definitely be there. I would rather them be required for the capstone dungeon because them as like a bonus thing, you would do it all. You would open up a chest and you'd find like 2 pieces of gear. You'd be like, huh, I wish I didn't waste my time going to kill those 5 guys. I'd rather it just be baked into what we're doing in the capstone and help to inform why the capstone matters at all. Let's talk about lower levels. You start off at level 1. And you are swinging a regular weapon, and then you level up 1 time and you get a skill point, and now you're swinging a basic skill. Then you level up a 2nd time and you add a modifier to your basic skill. And then you level up a 3rd time and you can go click a core skill. And at that point, your rotation looks like basic skill, basic skill, basic skill, core skill, run out of essence, basic skill, basic skill. And it turns out that feels bad. Nobody really likes that, especially if your class doesn't have good basic skills, like the Necromancer, where our basic skills don't move us halfway across the map like every other class does. Well, except for the Sorceress. Shout out to the Sorceress. Early level feeling bad. I think that they could be better front loading the additional skill points that you gain through the seasonal progress. So if the seasonal progress had a bunch of activities that you would be doing in those early levels, like levels 1 through 10, levels 1 through 20, your build would come online a little bit faster, and you would get to the entirety of your build, meaning your ultimate skill and your key passive, faster as well. Like if I had my build quote unquote online, meaning I had all the skills that I wanted to be using, by level 20, I would feel really good. Needing to wait those like last 10 levels before I have the passive that fully defines my character and the ultimate skill that enables it just doesn't feel great. And if I was basically getting like 2 skill points every level for the first 10 levels, it doesn't wildly skew my power in the early game. It just gives me the tools that I need to make the experience not feel bad. And just to talk about how they like extended the ranges over which you have bad gear, this didn't really help me. It didn't help me to like treasure my magic quality gear. What I basically just did was the moment I picked up a piece of magic gear, I equipped it. I only ever swapped out my weapon if I picked up a better weapon. And then I didn't equip another item until I found rare gear, and then I just replaced all my magic gear with rare gear, and I didn't replace another piece of gear, except for my weapons, until I found legendary gear. This is what we already did before. It just took longer, and I was like still picking up base pieces of gear while looking at some of my first legendaries. Like I found normal rings and a piece of legendary gear. That doesn't feel good. I don't feel better for this. It has terrible salvage, it has terrible sell values, and I just don't want to pick them up. And you also still level so quickly that by the time I was picking up legendary gear, I had to be dropping like magic and normal gear out of my inventory just because I randomly picked it up on controller. It just made it clunkier. I don't really see the benefit of it. There's another issue though that's a little bit harder to like fully encapsulate what it means. But if you didn't know, there's something called the Codex of Power. And the Codex of Power is a list of aspects that you used to be able to go unlock from different dungeons. Some of them are like really key to a character, like the damned aspect on the Necromancer increases our damage by 35%, basically for free. But the leveling progression is so fast, and the content of the Helltide is so much more valuable than going and like spending 5, even 10 minutes, like running through a dungeon at low level just to unlock a power, that there's almost no reason to go do those things. And because of that, you just don't unlock these powers at the rate that we used to like way back in the day. But what we do have are reward caches from this seasonal progress. What I would love to see is like a pseudo PoE 1 outcome here, where the first seasonal progress thing you do, which is like start your season quest line, would have a cache. And that cache would give the option of picking at the very least like one of the lowest rolls of whatever core skill your class has. So I can go get Reaping Lotus for Sever, or I could go get Gore Quills, or I could go get Blood Bathed. Whatever the core skill is for your character, the first cache lets you pick one. And then we would do the same thing for a defensive aspect, a utility aspect, and a resource aspect. So you can get the things that make it so that your class works earlier. And it would further incentivize you to actually want to do the seasonal progression and make sure that you're actually paying attention to that thing. All in all, I think we're too late into the experience of this game in this genre for us to like still kind of being effed over by RNG sometimes, where you just haven't found the aspect for the build that you want to play. So you are forced to play something else and it just feels bad. Toughness. Now, I know a lot of people feel a lot of different ways about toughness. And there's a lot of questions out there of why did this even need to happen? Let me just very quickly make a good claim for toughness. In the current system, it's very easy. You get to 1,000 armor, and you have to understand that you get minus 1,000 armor being in Torment 4, so you really had to get up to 2,000 armor. And then you have to get up to 75% all resistance, understanding that you got minus 100 all resistance going up to Torment 4, so you actually had to get 175 all resistance. Very simple to understand. Has a green indicator there. As long as you're not colorblind, you know you've reached it. The issue here is that it means that there was never any incentivizer and no way to become tankier in a meaningful way. Any armor or resistances you got over that were wasted. And the idea that a stat can be wasted sucks, right? Especially when you have no way of engaging with it in a meaningful capacity. Changing over to a system where with diminishing returns, you will always get tankier if you get more armor and get more resistances is better. It allows for greater player expression of what they think is the most important. Allows hardcore players to actually get tankier as well. And it is actually like easier once you get what's going on. The major issue I find is with the character stat sheet, the lack of opportunities for educating the player and how it actually teaches negative outcomes as potentially good outcomes with nothing in between to let you know like, hey, that actually wasn't a great idea. What this also allows the developers to have is two really important tools. Better ability to balance the relative survivability of each class independently, because before, if you made a class better at getting armor, that didn't really do anything. There was a cap. It didn't matter if you made a class get better at getting resistances. It didn't matter if you gave them more of these stats in their Paragon. It didn't matter. Similarly, their uniques either did or didn't have to have these stats on them. They really couldn't be part of the equation for what a character would look like in the end game. So there's better balancing of the individual classes. And then for monsters, we can now actually scale their damage. Now, I don't think that they have succeeded because, again, I'm either dead or I'm not. But they have the ability to do it. Whereas before, since everybody had a maximum cap for armor and a realistic maximum cap for resistances, regardless of using things like Duriel or incenses, there was just like well, we can't make monsters really do more damage because the characters have such wildly different amounts of barrier generation and maximum life that it's like not realistic to approach it from any way where it won't just hyper alienate one of the classes. That is all really important. And I think that now that I've sat with this system, it is good. Let's talk about the downsides though, because this is ultimately a feedback video. I think that the vectors through which we get to choose becoming more tanky and stacking more damage are still like too stark, and there really aren't choices to be made in some circumstances. If you play the Necromancer, here's an example. You could be wearing legendary pants with the aspect Hardened Bones. Hardened Bones is a 30% damage reduction aspect. Really, really strong. Or you could be wearing pants that say Blood Moon Breaches that grant you a 50% damage multiplier. If your build can wear Blood Moon Breaches without dying, you've effectively bumped up 2 pit tiers. Now, it's not exactly how the math works out, but if you're on the cusp of being able to clear a pit, that plus 1 more pit tier is what you would go up. Pants saying plus 2 pit tiers is insane. Difference between these two things is so wildly stark. I think that is still very much a problem. Let's talk about the stat screen very quickly. If you haven't looked into toughness, it's going to sound like I'm talking an alien language, but I promise you this all makes sense. I would rather it show effective DR as opposed to effective hit points. Effective hit points doesn't tell me anything because I don't know what kills me. If you give me a death screen with an amount of damage in an element, it starts to kind of tell me that, but it doesn't really educate me about what to do about it. Effective DR, on the other hand, tells me the reduction of total incoming damage. And because toughness is so esoteric, if I tell you reach 75% minimum DR, you can get there. If I tell you 250,000 toughness is good while you have these 3 things activated, this is now like impossible for a player to really grok. Similarly, right now what it shows you is your average toughness. The issue here is that if you bump up 1 resistance super high, you have increased your toughness, which just isn't true because there isn't a particular damage type that is more prevalent in the game than others, and you can never choose what damage types you're going to be engaging with. Like, sure, technically against lair bosses, they do physical and then also a particular element. So there you can make informed decisions. But if I just bump up my physical resistance a whole bunch, I'm going to keep dying. Why? Because every other damage type gets applied to me in the game. If it instead showed the minimum toughness that you have, this would actually help to educate. It would do it in 2 different ways. One, putting in a ruby when fire resistance is already your highest wouldn't increase your minimum toughness. And you would go, hey, what gives? And you would hover over toughness and you would see that your fire is really, really big, but what it's showing you is your cold res. Doing it this way helps players to understand that they have to diversify their resistances, basically meaning they always have to take all res or armor to increase their toughness. Likewise, they could increase their maximum life to increase their toughness, but increasing a particular resistance's toughness isn't actually increasing the average chance of them surviving. So this minimizes the amount of poor decisions players could make with no ability to learn that it was a poor decision. The last thing is that they need to take maximum life out of the hover tooltip and put it dead square there in the center. Why? Maximum life is without question the biggest overall contributor to your effective HP because everything gets multiplied against your maximum life to figure out what your effective life is. Hiding it in the hover screen makes it seem like maximum life is a substat and not the most important thing, when it is quite literally the most important thing. So bringing it back out would help me to say like, hey, if you have 250,000 toughness, but only like 2k life, you're doing something wild. It just is important, and it's weird to hide it. Also, playing on controller, you can't hover the toughness stat. So you literally can't see your maximum life without going into your extended character stat sheet and then scrolling down to defense. That's insane for a pivotal stat for your character. This might feed more into the concept of itemization, but it does relate very specifically to this toughness change. Skills in this game have been fully carried, I mean on full life support, by unique items. Every time a skill sucked, the developers would put in a unique item that would make it better, and now you have to use that unique item. Because of that, the power of a unique item has always been taken against a specific economy that was according to the old world logic and the old world mindset of how they were developing the game. Now, though, because these skills haven't been addressed in their base functionality, you have to use unique items to fix them. For Blood Surge Necromancer, you have to use Krora's Embrace. For Bloodlance Necromancer, you have to use Mutilator's Plate. For Bone Spear, you have to use Deathless Visage and Indira's Memory, so that's a fun little double bonus there, etc., etc. With Minion Necromancer, you have to use Ring of Men down. Some builds, you'll notice though, are disproportionately impacted by this. Not being able to equip Shroud of False Death on Bloodlance Necromancer basically means that it is weaker and can't survive as much as Blood Surge, our historically worst performing build. That's hilarious. I mean bad. Hilariously bad. I think that these changes to itemization and the swap over to toughness needed to come with like a widespread rework of skills and the reabsorption of quality of life and functionality from uniques into the skills themselves. And then unique items can just be left as a choice between more survivability or more damage output, right? Like you have this itemization vector to consider your build over. Do I want to put on the thing that will scale my damage the hardest or the thing that will make me survive better? We can't make that decision in the game currently because you have to equip the unique item for the skill to work. That's a clear issue here. Also, with how important survivability stats have become, the Paragon journey and prioritization has shifted. That's not inherently a bad thing, but Paragon is so simple and so much power is locked in Paragon that now needing to path to all of the survivability stats makes progressing through your Paragon boards take longer, meaning that it takes longer for you to acquire power. Again, not inherently bad, but because it's spread out over so many nodes and so many nodes have been swapped over to armor and resistances, it feels like we are spending twice the amount of points to get a minimum amount of survivability. I would rather see half of the nodes that were swapped over to armor and res just be doubled in value, and the other nodes be swapped over to damage or other utility that you would typically find in a Paragon board. One, it would re-add texture to it because all the boards basically just say a glyph, a legendary node that scales your damage, 3 to 4 other nodes that all say maximum life, armor, or res. It's incredibly, incredibly bland and boring. And we will be able to progress our Paragon board, still prioritizing survivability nodes, but at least unlocking everything. So we now have hit this like minimum power scale. And then as we develop our character further, our gear gets better. We can then transfer nodes from survivability up into damage. It gives like a greater total progression into power where you will hit these different breakpoints in your character's progression where you're like, oh, I could take these 5 nodes out of here, bump them up into damage, and I'm still surviving. Cool, we're making this work. It would just feel a lot better, I think. And then tower, short and sweet. I'm literally just going to read it off here because I feel like I did a good job of encapsulating how I felt. 1, tower takes too long, 10 minutes is too long. It could be 5 minutes and I would feel better. Pylons are either too impactful or do nothing. Like the power pylon's awesome. Then you have the things that grant you like cooldown, resource management, and attack speed. Technically speaking, on some builds, these things are powerful, but the majority of the time, if your build isn't at your attack speed cap and managing your resource and managing your cooldowns, you have a crap build. So you would never make a build that needs these pylons to be active because they are short-term buffs. So they just feel like absolutely nothing. And if only one of them matters, then all the other ones feel bad. Obviously, people have been complaining about them taking too long to kill. That feels like an issue, right? That they'll just like take down how much health it is. I don't know why I have to kill a structure to get it in the first place either. Just feels very weird to me. The maps are too inconsistent. The layouts and mob types are so bad that there are just automatic resets. And if people don't know, my background is actually from speedrunning Diablo 2. That's like where I first made my mark. That's where I first joined the community at large. And that's where I first started getting like deep into theory crafting, was in being a speedrunner. And I can tell you from years of speedrunning, different categories in Diablo 2, when you reset a run, really, really kills motivation. There's a thing in Diablo 2. If you're unaware, I'll just give you a quick rundown, called the top left exit. The different exits out of the first starter town, the rogue encampment, actually inform all of the other maps that you're going to get in your seed. It's not a one-to-one, like, when you leave the top left, we can't figure out exactly where you're going to go in the Arcane Sanctuary. But there are a lot of maps that are literally almost hard-coded. Like, if you get a top left exit that immediately cuts up to the right, you are always going to have the Stony Field as the bottom right exit coming out of the Cold Plains. The entrance to the underground passage will always be in the middle of the map after a short run. This means that you'll always find Rakanishu within a certain amount of map exploration. This will then always have a particular outline in the underground passage where you always want to run to a very specific area. Like, it is that level of specific. Because it's so good, you reset your run 1 second in until you get a top left exit. That sucks. You could be resetting runs for like an hour before you even attempt to speedrun. I don't want to do that in the tower. The tower is speedrunning with a leaderboard attached to it for all intents and purposes. And resetting the moment I jump in and I have that weird dungeon where just like every single corner is a dead end and so tight that monsters can't even see you and then they all get stuck and it's literally unrunnable. I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to participate with this content. And considering all we have is the pit and the tower, as far as like end game, prove your worth, prove to anybody that like they should be even kind of, like respectful of your expertise, this can't be it. And I also feel like the tower is going to get very lame very quickly. Now, I liked the Gauntlet. The major issue with the Gauntlet is that there was supposed to be no RNG, and there was actually a ton of RNG. Oh, and all the weird exploits and bugs that they kept finding. But the base conceit of it, which was that every week or so, we were going to have a layout, we were going to be able to optimize that layout, and we were going to be able to make decisions that had different strategies, and then whoever was the best at finding a strategy, and then the best at executing with the best gear would win. That's pretty cool. I think that's the closest that you can get to like realistic competition ARPG. Now, there's obviously issue with like RMT and the fact that like you just can't beat some people's gear no matter what. Kind of sucks, but that's a whole other conversation. The tower, though, is random maps. So there's RNG there, but nothing else really going for it. If you've ever played like World of Warcraft, they have this thing Mythic Plus, where there's basically new variables that are on a rotating timetable that are going to change the stuff that you're doing. I'd love to see that for the tower. I wish there were like 20 buffs to the tower. Like the tower is whatever. The tower can be these maps, or monsters in the tower are going to have these debuffs, or your character is going to have this debuff, which is going to lower your attack speed and cooldown reduction. Stuff like that, where you could re-itemize, re-optimize, create new strategies, and create new builds that will make certain things better at doing the tower 1 week to another week. Well, that's a lot of overhead. If they just made like 20 of them and they randomly rotated throughout a season, and it was always like a different combination of them than we had seen previously, that's enough for me. Right now, the best build to run the tower on day 1 is going to be the best build to run the tower on the last day of the season, because there's not going to be changes throughout the season. And since we know they're not doing like mid-season updates either, what it means is that unless you are willing to play the best build, you can't actually compete in the tower. You could do the tower for your own self, and nobody is really trying to like pump for the top 10 or even top 100, right? But for the people who do care about competition, there just will be a build. If you don't like that build, you're screwed. And I really don't like that. I wish that there was more dynamic changes here, that it was more influenced by different things than just the current meta build that exists and pure RNG after that. There's very little expression for player skill here. But that's it. That's how I feel about everything. That's my feedback to them. I sent this off to them already. I tried to be as like meaningful in what I wrote here as possible, and tried to be as little of a screaming, rage baby as I possibly can. But hopefully the people who, are frustrated, you got a little bit of vindication of the fact that I'm also frustrated, right? None of this is perfect. I just don't think it's the end of the world, and I don't think they're trying to burn the franchise to the ground, right? They're literally trying to solve the problems that the game has, and if that's a bad thing, I don't know how they're going to make people happy. But sound off down in the comments. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching this video. Hopefully it helps. Hopefully you kind of vibed with it, and if not, that's okay, man. We're all different. That's okay. But again, thank you very much for watching this video. I truly, truly hope that it helps. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.